The FujiCast is an independent loading zone production.
Kev, in my case, this is going to be very difficult because, being English, it's obviously a very difficult subject. You're Welsh.
It's easy for me.
Is it?
Yeah, easy.
Is it?
Yeah.
Money.
Give us some.
No, Kev, you can't do that.
Well,
honestly,
we can.
No. Well, look, we'd like to thank you very much for the tip jar. Kev's bought a helicopter. I bought a brand new car.
Yep.
Look at this. I bought a car at the price. I've always wanted a Jensen Interceptor. There we are. That's my Jensen Interceptor.
Very good.
It's, 176th model
You're
size?
being English and avoiding the subject.
Am I?
Yes. Shall I carry on?
Yeah.
Shall I take it on?
Take this one on the chin.
So Neil and I, is in the last 2.5 years, or however many it is, have been...
It's about 2 years, isn't it?
Very, very patiently coming here every week.
Well, I'm here anyway.
Yeah, well, I've been coming here every week.
But I do have to walk down to the end of the garden.
And we've been recording those things, and we love it. We absolutely love it, and we love the Facebook group, and we love the community, and we love the meetups when we used to be able to meet up and all that stuff. And we did...
We'll do that again.
We will, of course. Yeah, we will. And we did get some very, very lovely help with the tip jar, especially over the lockdown period.
Yes.
Very kindly.
Yes.
However, we have decided that we will formalise it a little bit more, and we decided that we're both very, very cool looking hipster type dudes. And we're smashing it. We realise we're smashing it all the time. Yeah. Every Monday, smash that.
Yeah.
Neil, we wrap up the podcast.
Smash that.
Neil throws his headphones on the floor and just walks out the room. Bish bash boshed it. Shut the back door.
I don't think there's such a phrase as that, Kev. I think that's a very different channel.
And because we're hipster dudes, we've decided to join the Patreon revolution.
Yes. Only 5 years late.
Yeah. So Patreon, if you don't know, is a place where you can go and help us. Let's just be honest. And for the price of a cup of coffee a month, you can help us. Yeah, simple as that. Now, we're not going to, the podcast
is free.
In its form is free to air. And we toyed with many different ideas and things, and in the end we just thought, let's just ask him for money.
Let's be like Oliver.
Yeah,
please sir,
more. Can I have some more? And of course, now listen, the fact of the matter is we don't we certainly we don't expect or I don't want, neither of us want you to be thinking you have to do this, and so the show is free still, and will be. So if you can help us, you can. And I'm looking at Neil's flash new car now, so it does. I would imagine the fuel is quite expensive.
Well, for this thing,
yeah.
I don't know where you put it in.
And and the brutal fact is, both Neil and I are unemployed wedding photographers right now.
I don't know why I'm laughing.
And well, if you don't laugh, what else have we got in life?
I'll tell you what, Kev.
It is what it is. It is what it is.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
So as Gemma says, she said to me the other day, she said, Kev, you know what? I live with you, but I want to live with Podcast Kev.
Oh, really?
Yeah. She said,
I
want to live with Podcast Kev because you're funny and you're just very different on the podcast. So she wants to live with Podcast Kev, and I said you won't be living with me at all if we can't afford to pay the mortgage anymore. So patreon.com FujiCast is the place to go to help me and Gemma stay together. Neil run his car and all kinds of other things like that.
I want a swimming pool.
The FujiCast.
Oh, and we might give some food to the kids.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Yeah. There is a guy on YouTube that ends every single one of his what's his name? I can't think of his name. I have a real sort of I can never think of his name. Brian G. Johnson. That's it, Brian G. Johnson. He does all these tips about how to be a better YouTuber, and at the end of it, he says, if you don't. I think he has a Patreon or something. He said, if you can help me, great. He said, because I've got 2 poodles and they're very hungry. You dig? And it really annoys me every time he says it.
Oh.
But
brilliant.
but I think he's quite successful with it. Yeah. And bless Brian, he does make me chuckle every time he says it.
But all that Patreon stuff will go towards running the show, of course.
Yes, it will. Yes.
And feeding the kids.
Feeding the kids.
Secondarily.
And keeping Kev in his marriage.
Yes. Podcast Kev.
Podcast Kev.
Grumpy Kev, who can off.
Poor old Grumpy. I like Grumpy Kev occasionally.
Yeah.
Oh, anyway. So, welcome to another episode. You and your questions from our electronic mailbag. And, of course, now also through the FujiCast private Facebook group. If you have not joined this group as yet, then please do. We kind of vet those that ask, but only because we just want to check that you are actually a person and not a bot or something. Send your emails as well in the old-fashioned way with any questions that you may have to click at fujicast.co.uk. They don't have to be tech. They can. It's just as nice to read social issue stuff as well that affects you in the photography world. And I think we got the last club indulgence from next week. I think it's going to be the Tumbleweed Connection. Wasn't there an album called Tumbleweed Connection? Isn't that Elton John?
Don't know.
I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah.
Kev's book. Oh, what have we got? Book of the week.
Oh, we've got another Anton Corbijn.
Oh, have we?
Private Passion.
One of your faves.
Yeah, another fave. Every week. My
Every
favourite
week's
book.
a fave.
Yeah.
That's t-shirt worthy. Do you want to launch with your question?
Let's crack on. I have an email from...
Go on, podcast, Kev.
Bethany Taylorson. Hi Neil and Kev, personal question about your businesses. If you weren't both family men being fathers and husbands, how would your businesses be different, if they even would? Would you still be shooting weddings? Would your outlook on everything, including where you lived, maybe even which countries you lived in, change at all? Keep up the good work and hoping for another conference in 2021 since I have missed the first two. Yeah. God blimey. I'm really glad we didn't organise a conference this year.
Can you imagine that? But I tell you what, the sort of the outline plan, which we can't talk about, obviously NDA between us and Fresh Air, is that it will be quite different the next one, but very exciting.
Yeah. Very different, very exciting.
Yes. Anyway, back to the question: would you do anything different if you didn't have the? I'm going back to the conversation we just had. I'm not sure we should ask you.
So the question is essentially if we didn't have our families.
Yes.
Okay. Which is a horrible thought, but
I
yes,
I
mean, of course, but it's an interesting concept, isn't it?
We went to Dorset the other day with the kids.
Could the door not look after itself?
With sort of the last hurrah knockings of holidays and stuff. Yeah. And as we were driving there and the kids were arguing in the back, Jack's terrible. He sometimes just nudges Thomas. You get this kind of, oof. And Thomas is like, why did you do that? And he's learned to say it loudly because that's what you're supposed to do at school. Don't do that. I don't like that. I thought, oh no, here we go. Just as we get into a little bit of a traffic jam. And Sam said to me, if we didn't have the kids, do you think we'd live in Dorset? I said, yeah. But and it actually silenced them as they listened to all our plans that we would have had. But this is a solo plan, of course, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, I fell into wedding photography, and I fell into wedding photography mainly because it were friends of ours. It's very difficult. It'd be very difficult to imagine that conversation. So the conversation wouldn't have happened. It happened because of mutual friends of ours that asked me to shoot weddings, and then before you know it, I'm a wedding photographer.
Let me try and rephrase this then, because I think this is what Bethany's asking.
Mm-hmm.
What's your ideal life without family? If you'd never had a family,
it's a terrible question.
But what would you be a disc jockey on the radio stations?
A disc jockey, broadcaster, love.
Would you be Brian Adams' beer bitch?
Sorry, Kev. I don't know. What would I think I don't know. I mean, photographer terms certainly wouldn't have gone down the business route that we went down. We started with the school photography, the commercial photography, and the portraits and the weddings. I think I would have ideally now portrait photographer. I'd love to be a portrait photographer with a few weddings, but really be able to look at the variety of work that you could do on the wedding front, and instead of thinking, well, this is a business, because there's nothing wrong with this, by the way. No. Any couples that might be listening thinking, does he want to shoot my wedding? Of course I do.
Yeah.
But
just not this year.
Not this year. But I don't mind, because I've got a couple coming up. But I think you photograph weddings, and sometimes you photograph 3 in a row, and you do that because that's what you do, it's your job. But would I do that if I was living on my own and didn't have to fund myself in quite the same way? Probably not. No, I'd choose to work maybe twice a month on weddings, or maybe once a month, and then spend the rest of my time trying to. I love the idea of van life, portrait van life, going on the road with the with a portrait studio in a van. I'd love that idea. That's very romantic.
I suspect for me, I would be very, very, very rich if my family weren't around. Yeah, because what happened to me was I used to work in London, as you know, long time ago, and some friends of mine set up a new little business. And in financial services.
Right.
Kev, come and work with us.
So you wouldn't even be a photographer?
Come and work with us.
Right.
At the time, me and I was in Life Number 1 at the time. So Life Number 1 was going in different directions.
Yeah.
And I decided not to do that. And now those 3 people are super loaded. Yeah.
Why did you say no?
So patreon.com FujiCast.
This sounds a very similar story to my father, who was a farmer by. He learned farming. That's what he did at university. I don't know, university, was it university or how would they do it? College, agricultural college. That was it.
Did you go to Cirencester?
I don't know. Do you know? I really don't know. I don't know which one he went to, but that doesn't ring a bell. And he had a best friend there called Derek. They were really great buddies, and one day they were out bailing. So they started on the farm, and one day they were out bailing wherever this farm was, and Derek got his arm caught in the baler.
Ouch.
Yeah. Now, Dad was very quick thinking, and he switched the baler off and practically saved Derek's life. And I think Derek always felt some sort of sense of, Dad was his best mate, and actually Derek was his best man at his wedding, and he felt this sense of I suppose maybe it's not duty. I mean, they were good friends. He said, would you like to come into the engineering business that I have with my father? My dad said, well, no, I think I'm going to go into my dad's business line, which was to do with sales.
It's a good job they both went to farming school then.
Yeah, I know. No, they didn't use it at all in the end. And then it turned out that Derek's father's business made these sort of fishing industry widgets with the bit that stops the reel on deep sea rods sort of going too far back, and whatever they do, whatever that release mechanism is, makes hundreds and hundreds of thousands of these things, and they're sold around the world. Specialist bit of widget kit, and overnight. Boom. Same scenario. My dad mentioned it once, but he never. I don't think he ever regretted it.
No, it's not a regret of mine either. I mean, had my life gone that route, then it wouldn't have gone the route it's gone now. And
okay, but
I couldn't have.
I mean, I know you've talked about doing that IT thing, but if you were a photographer, on your own, son, what would you be doing?
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, if you're not thinking of like a proper dream, I'd love to be a touring musician, sports photographer, going around with the team or the band or whatever. But that's not something that you can necessarily get into particularly easily. Yeah, portraits probably, nice, which sounds ridiculous because both of us are documentary photographers and we spend all our time saying, we don't do portraits.
And then
we want to do portraits.
I know.
Bloody hell, portraits. Good God. Black and white, miserable only. Thank you very much. No smiles.
It's my specialist subject.
But the thing is, isn't it interesting? Because we'll look at today's book, Anton Corbijn, and last week's Brian Adams book and everything, and it's the portraits that we love.
I know. Isn't that funny?
But I think it's because you can't easily do portraits in a way that you want to do them, and for them to be commercially successful. That's a challenge. That guy, what's his name, Platon?
Yes,
he's got a unique look to his pictures.
He has,
and very successful, of course. And he does them in the way that he wants. But mostly, when you think of portraits, you're going to think of your traditional high street studio type portraits. They're the ones that people want to stick on their wall, and that's mostly because they don't know that you can do it any other way. But yeah, I suppose, I don't know, it's a really good question, Bethany.
Well, I'm just zipping something up on the screen here.
Ooh.
Bill Wadman, okay, he's a New York photographer, and he's
look at that.
He either will have been or is coming up on the Photography Daily podcast. Does that mouse work?
No.
Oh, sorry. I put new batteries in it as well. Wiggle it around a bit. It should work. But is it not working?
No.
It's run out of batteries again. Sorry about this.
It's can you switch it on, or is it just?
Just a little switch on the back. No. That's the wrong bit, Kev. Oh. That's the battery compartment. You really don't know Mac, do you?
No.
Let me click a couple for you. Right. Okay. So Bill, in New York, he asked his so BillWadman.com. he asked his wife whether he could set up a corner in the apartment. Because I always thought this was a great thumping big studio that he had in New York. Some sort of loft studio, which are fantastic spaces that you can get. But it's not. He loves painting things. There's even a blog post on how he painted this background, by the way.
These are photographs, though, right? Even though they're very painterly looking.
Yeah, they're all photographs.
Right.
Yeah. And I'll click through them as we're talking. And whenever anybody goes to his home, he asks them just to pose for a portrait.
Oh, God, just great, isn't it?
And these are so simple, aren't they?
Isn't it funny how all the people who go to his home are beautiful?
Yes, there is that. I did think that. Yeah.
I wonder if he'd ask us.
Well, he might, and he might humour us with the portrait, but he probably wouldn't put it on his site. We're going to go to New York, aren't we? So I'm going to look Bill up, and I'm going to say, Bill, can we do a portrait?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm out that day.
Yeah. Sorry. Oh, there's me.
Yeah. Hey, he looks a lot like you in no way, shape, or form.
He does. Yeah.
There's me.
No, these are great.
They are great, aren't they? But
Bill
I mean, it's so simple. Bill Wadman, simple idea. And he has a lovely backstory, by the way. He started with a 365 project, and this 365 project just elevated him at a time when people weren't really doing 365s. It was a few years before Instagram started up, so it was quite a bold, project at the time. But all he's done is he's making these wonderful portraits.
I'm going to do this.
Well, funny you should say that. You know that set. You know the sofa I gave you.
Yeah.
Look at the way that's rotted. I don't know what's eating through it, but we actually think we've got something in here that's eating leather. So that is going.
Nice.
And Sam said to me the other day, she'd seen this, and she said, "Why don't you do like Bill Wadman? Because you can make that whole corner."
Yeah.
And I said, "I'm going to do that." And I wrote to Bill, and I said, "Bill, I'm going to steal the idea that we talked about on an interview the other day." He said, "That's great." And he sent me a link and all this stuff that I need to make my own corner.
But you should. The thing is, if you have it here,
yeah.
You see, I quite like the idea of forcing anybody who comes in my house to have a picture taken.
Yes.
Like, it doesn't matter who it is. Could be the postman. Could be bloke coming to fix the boiler.
Mm-hmm.
He comes a lot, actually.
Stop it.
Does he? That's interesting.
Yeah, usually when I'm not in.
Oh.
Anyway, I think that I'm going to try and do something like that. Where would I put it? I haven't got any space.
I'm trying to think where you would put this in your house. Front room, where the Christmas tree goes usually.
Yeah, I don't think Gemma would really like it.
No, but if you show her Bill Wadman's site, she's going to say, "Gemma, I'm telling you, Kev can do this because..." What do you think, Gemma? See, she said yes.
She would say yes to podcast Kev.
Yeah.
But she wouldn't say yes to real life Kev.
Ask her as podcast Kev then. That's it's very simple, Kev. All problems in your life are sorted as long as you become podcast Kev.
Yeah. And the heating engineer man.
What does the heating engineer man look like?
Nice guy.
Yeah. So
Heating Henry.
I'm not sure. Did we just sort of leap outside? But I know we didn't really leap outside. But that's something. If I lived in this little house, this sort of, and I have this ideal of living in a beautiful little house, maybe a lighthouse or something.
See, now I'd be a very good hermit.
Yeah, but
I could live in a lighthouse.
Would you?
By myself.
Right. No, but the idea is to open it up so people can come and do portraits.
Yeah, like maybe one day a year.
Kev. Anyway, if that answers your question, I hope it did. But by the way, go and look at Bill Wadman's, and we'll leave a link for it.
And the interview is on Photography Daily.
Photography Daily. I've got several parts coming up actually with Bill, and Charlie Clift actually has done a similar thing on his website. He did corners but he built this corner for the BAFTA Awards, and his corner is sort of full of people like Benedict Cumberbatch and people that have won BAFTAs. But he's a very similar idea. Let me just zoom this one up on the screen as well so you can see this as well, Kev, because you'll like this. There we go. There's one straight away. So slightly different kind of corner. So it seems corners, Kev, are the way to go.
Yeah.
You heard it here. Right, question this is from Michael Lynn. Hi Neil, hi Kev. First off, thanks for the great podcast. Definitely one of my faves. You're very kind. I have a question for you. I'm going to be having my first child, and he wrote in a couple of weeks ago, so I think we are probably in the sort of maybe week leading up to this, or possibly a couple of days. Due to COVID-19, only one person other than the mum is allowed in the hospital. Since I can't hire a photographer, I'm going to do it myself. If you had to choose between a 35mm or 50mm equivalent, which one would you pick? so I guess you can't have a lot of gear with you by the sound of it. I'm comfortable with both focal lengths, just not sure what might be the most suitable for this kind of situation. I'd like to keep it minimal, please, so my plan is to take one fast prime lens only. Any other tips and advice would be appreciated. That's from Michael Lynn, who's in Toronto. So, well, first of all, good luck. If you've had your little one, well done, congratulations. But it does sound like you might be in the few days leading up to this momentous occasion in both your lives. So, congratulations in advance. And Kev, you have shot this kind of work, so you're the best person to answer this.
Yeah, I have shot a couple of births, and I mean, I suppose the thing that comes to mind here is it's just common sense stuff. You know, it's different if it's your child, of course, but for me it wasn't. And just common sense. Be very aware of what's going on around you. Do not get in anybody's way, of course, all of that stuff.
What sort of stuff are you photographing? What are you looking for? Because, I mean, obviously, it can't just, you know, there's got to be scene-setting stuff. I remember one of the pictures you featured was the clock, clock ticking, and which is obviously very important for context.
Yeah, again, it's you know, this is not probably the kind of thing that's going to go through your mind on the day that the baby's being born. But if you can think of things like a start and middle and an end. So, you know, the start is, when I've done it, is usually been, you know, when the doctors come into the room, the clock's on the wall, you know, hubby and wife kind of sitting together and, you know, getting prepared and all that kind of stuff. And then the middle, of course, is the birth. And then the end is usually, well, in this case, those cases, has been the clock again on the wall, which is like 11 hours later or whatever it is. Yeah. So things like that. But ultimately, you know, there is no greater... I don't think there's no greater momentous type of picture that you can make than the moment that somebody becomes a human, or not becomes a human. They're humans before that, of course, but the moment they breathe their first breath, natural breath.
Crying.
Yeah, I think that's an incredible thing to be able to do, and especially if it's for your own family, and, you know, it's crazy. But yeah, times are difficult right now because of the this pesky blinking bug.
COVID, yes.
And so, you know, things will be different. And
well, they won't be that different, will they?
Well, I don't know. Maybe they'll have...
We're one birthing partner down, but generally, I mean, in the hospital, generally speaking, I mean, it's certainly for the birth of our two little ones, we were only allowed two birthing partners. So it was me and Sam's mum. And on the second occasion, actually, it was just me.
Yeah, but what I mean is it could well be things like, you know, will they allow you to take a camera in without dipping it in disinfectant?
Yes. I would assume it sounds like Michael's got the go-ahead for that.
Yeah, sounds like it. So anyway, yes, good luck. I hope it's either gone well or will go well, depending on whenever it is.
You must let us know.
Yeah, absolutely.
You might be sending us just a photo, so thanks for your advice. I went with.
Yeah.
But thanks, but no thanks, kind of thing.
Do send us pictures.
Please do.
Yeah.
I think we've got time for a question from you, and then we'll go for this week's interview. Go on then.
Okay, so I have a question here from Keith Johnson, and he says, "Hi guys, a Lightroom question for you.
Yep.
Using the XT4 on film simulation bracketing, 2 colour and 1 black and white. When importing them into Lightroom, I have no problem, and in the library module in the grid view, you can see the film simulations. The problem starts when I click on the photo, and as it loads, the simulations are removed and they appear to go back to the default settings.
Right.
The black and white picture loads in colour. In the settings, I have load RAWs as camera default, not Adobe, but as the simulations are JPEG, I know that should not affect them, but I cannot seem to find a setting to stop this. Many thanks, Keith." Off you go then.
I love it when you do that. One day I'm going to surprise you and come back with a whole load of technical stuff.
Well, actually, I don't know the answer to this because it's so when you do bracketing in Fujifilm cameras, you can shoot 3 film simulations, and up until the XT2 or firmware 4 of the XT2, I think it was, you could only shoot JPEGs. So if you chose to do a black and white, a color, and maybe a sepia, and then you would get 3 JPEGs. Now you can do a RAW and the 3 JPEGs.
Right.
Okay, but what it actually does, which is silly, is it creates 3 RAW files of an identical picture and 3 JPEGs,
which you don't need.
You need the JPEGs because different film
not the
simulations.
RAWs.
You don't need 3 RAWs. No. So in Lightroom, there is a setting in the preferences that says treat RAW and JPEG files separately. So I suspect, Keith, when you're going into the develop module, it's just showing you the RAW file. That's definitely what's happening because your black and white is then suddenly being sucked away and turned back to a raw color RAW file. The JPEGs will be there, but for some reason you've got Lightroom configured to show you the RAW file. So I would go into the preferences and make sure you've got treat RAW and JPEG files separately. See what happens. But the JPEGs will be there. They've definitely, if they're recording them in the camera, they will be there. It won't just be recording 4 raw files.
There we go.
Anyway, there you go.
Help desk stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you know when you were saying that Gemma likes podcast, Kev?
Yeah.
Are you ever help desk Kev at home?
All the time.
Are you?
All the time.
All the time. Right, let's do this could be the last club indulgence because you've been so kind sending in your lovely reviews on Apple Podcasts, and
I think they've all gone somewhere else.
Stuff. Yeah. Well, I mean, the listeners are still there because we see the stats, but you might have run out of nice things to say. So next week it could be tumbleweed. You go first because I've just got the one here. Have you even got them? Come on, Kev.
I did have them. Didn't I give them back to you?
No, I've only got the one. There we go.
I've got.
Right, there. You launch with that one then.
I've only got 2.
Well, that's okay. That's half the music's been taken up with you looking for them.
This one's from Olmucky from the United States. Olmucky.
Oh.
And he says, so enjoyed being introduced to Leonard and his work. Thanks, Neil and Kevin.
Oh, Leonard Neumann.
Neumann. Yes.
Black and white sort of street master in this country. This one's from Nico Boyce Hardy. That sounds like something out of Only Fools and Horses. Boyce Hardy. Boise. Absolutely brilliant show.
Marlene.
But two friends who've got good banter. What I like most is the breadth of guests who provide a great insight into what it means to be or become a photographer in various genres. And leave out most of the time never-ending gear conversation. Well, occasionally we go into gear, but yeah, well, you're right, not too often. Keep up the great work. Yada 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 yada. Thank you, Nico.
This is from Johnny Boy 665.
Yeah,
Johnny Boy, I love that. It seems like it should be a car or something. Johnny Boy 665. There are very few podcasts I look forward to each week. This is one that I do.
This is one of them.
And it provides an excellent mix of information, views, interviews, and humour.
Yeah.
Its production values are excellent. That's all Neil, by the way. And it should be in the podcast.
Should be in the.
And it should be the podcast that others should use as a template.
Ah, right.
Look at that.
Very kind.
It's presented by photographers with a known background in quality photography and broadcasting, and the tips and advice they provide are ones that you should take note of. Good.
There we go. Thank you for that.
Johnny
and
Boy
thank you
665.
for all your lovely things that you've said. And remember, if you sent one in,
You're our favourite listener, and we mean it.
Next week
Might be the last time you use that jingle.
it might be. Next week it's going to be.
Well, we'll use that time to go and have a coffee while we just leave silence on air.
No, you can't be silent.
Oh, no.
You can never have silence because
Goes into the emergency record.
It does.
Broadcast.
It starts to. Well, I think in podcast, it starts to shorten it or something. Something weird happens. But certainly in broadcasting, if ever you, and this caught me out terribly one day. I'm not sure if I should tell this story. Oh, go on, I'll tell it. I'm not bothered about the bosses, but it's not the most pleasant story. But if you left silence, it would play the emergency tape, which was either backup music or
because they think London's been nuclearised or something
like that. I went to the loo. It was
clearly not just for a wee.
during a breakfast show, and I took the newspaper with me.
Oh no!
And played American Pie. Now, for those that know American Pie by Don McLean, you will know that it's one of the longest songs. What is it? 8 minutes something or something like that.
The extended one is.
It's a long song, and I thought, well, I've got a little while here. And I didn't. It just skipped and stopped halfway through. It was a CD, just stopped, and it went silent. And I heard the silence because in the loo it had like your little tannoy that would play back your
play what's live.
Yeah, and it stopped. I've never finished up quite so quickly.
That is gross.
I told you it'd be. I told you it'd be gross, didn't I?
No.
But it isn't. It's a. Well, you get the picture, don't you?
I'm going to change your name on my phone to Plip Plop Neil.
Well, I tell you what though, the emergency tape kicked in. I got such a telling off in the mid-morning program meeting where he asked me, the program controller asked me, he said, "What happened there, Neil?" Australian chap called Andrew, very nice, a really nice chap, and I went red. And I thought, well, I can either make a load of excuses, but I wasn't that quick thinking, so I just told the truth. And the entire room fell about, and they never let me forget it. There we go. Anyway, time for this week's interview, I think. Wayne Johns, Fujifilm ex-photographer, part of the ambassadorial team, is back for part 2 of our profile on him, and we talk fashion, lighting, and how you get into this genre. I will say that during this part of the interview, the heavens absolutely opened, Wayne's End. And you can just about hear it, but I'm sure it won't ruin your listening pleasure. So settle back for round 2 of Wayne John's Fashion and Beauty. What is the difference?
Well, fashion, you're selling clothing. If we look at say a fashion campaign rather than editorial, an editorial is where you tell a story. So you can have 6 different looks, let's say, and the clothing involved in those 6 different looks may be from 12 different clothing designers. So you're using those styling items to all marry up together to tell your story, which were your concept that you put together prior to your shoot. So editorial is storytelling, whereas a fashion shoot, you're actually selling the brand. Your model is wearing the brand of clothing, so you may be shooting Givenchy or Dolce & Gabbana or something like that, and everything the model would wear would be all of those things generally from that designer rather than a mixed bag. And beauty work, where you're turning that over more for skin, product, jewelry, all those kind of things, where you're shooting perhaps a little bit closer up and a bit more cropped in, and you're filling your frame more with the face of people. That's a short description of it, really.
But they're both sort of fit into the commercial sort of fashion industry, I suppose.
Yeah, because, even in the makeup world, you have colours that trend season upon season, year upon year. Even Pantone have their involvement in that, with the trending colour of the year. And the makeup types and styles and textures and the way that all changes all works sort of side by side with the fashion world and the clothing as well. So, yeah, you have similarities when they both have their trends, if you want to call it that, and the seasons.
I suppose we come back to lighting, really, particularly with beauty work, in that you've got to be very precise. And are you? I know some photographers have a very simple setup. They like it's one key, one fill, perhaps, or you got me with my one snoot thrown in for good measure. But in terms of yourself as a master, and I'll embarrass you by calling you that. How do you work?
I've got some of my colleagues that will be kicking themselves now, especially one. Well, Jake, obviously, who's a host of my podcast. I love shooting with one light. If I could get away.
One light, you master of lighting, you?
Hey, if you can master one light,
Yes. Yeah. Well, there are plenty of photographers through history who've only ever worked with one light.
Exactly. Even if I'm using strobe, or flash. Sorry, I'm jumping on the American terminology. Strobe. I do use more than one light. Of course I do. And sometimes our setups do require, quite a few lights, especially if you're shooting on location. And I don't mean outdoors, but indoors. If you're in a building, you need to light certain areas of a room to balance the shot. You need to balance your scene before you can light your subject. So you've got 2 sets of lighting to take into account to make the image work. But I love simplicity, and there's so much you can do with one light and reflectors just by changing your lighting modifiers. And people that have been on my workshops will see that I've used one light to replicate sunlight at about 2-3 p.m. in the afternoon, and then I've used the same light to create quite a dark and moody shot with a bit of contrast and darkness falling off into the shadows, just because I've changed the modifier on that and changed the output power. But 2 completely different looks, but still using one light source. So I think if you can master your light, and that's the difference with I just want to point that out, if people are shooting outdoors a lot and using Mother Nature's light, with studio light, we've got to recreate our whole lighting scene with our lighting. So if I want a sunny day, I've got to create it. If I want a grey day, I've got to create it. If I want a nighttime scene, I've got to create it. That's what you've got to master, I think, is creating those environments.
We started out our conversation talking about fashion work, and in some respects it was not depressive, but there was quite negative. I think it's fair to say there was kind of a gloomy outlook with regard to fashion.
So wrong of me to do that. Sorry.
Well, no, not necessarily, because I always prefer somebody to be authentic and honest and genuine about how they find the business. And of course, this perhaps would be a different conversation out of COVID times. But for those that are interested in working in fashion and beauty and advertising, is there a kind of, if you like, roadmap of how to go doing that?
You've got, I think, you've just got to shoot you've got to be aware of current fashions, and seasons with those fashions. I think you've got to be aware of what's trending. You've got to keep on the ball, because it's no good shooting your next door neighbour in a new top that she's bought from H&M, because if they've already bought that from the high street, then it means that trend and fashion has already happened. So you've got to build your links with teams in the fashion world. You need to have a link with a stylist and a design, maybe a designer, but maybe more a stylist, a makeup artist, a hairstylist, a manicurist is important. Got to have those nails looking good as well.
Manicurist, right.
Yeah, you have to start building a team in the fashion world, because everybody's got their own job, and it really, really is important. You can't do it all in the commercial world yourself. Your stylist is probably going to be your right-hand man or woman, and they are going to be your best friend, especially when you come to create mood boards for your concept or theme. So you've got to have your theme or your story in mind to begin with, because that's where the rest of your team will work from. If they have no idea where you're going, then your shoot's going to have no idea. I think you've got to have that in mind, and you've got to understand, if you want to submit, say, a 6-page spread to a magazine, one, you've got to have the magazine, even online ones, I don't mean the main titles, because that'll be really hard to get into. Start off with the lower level magazines. There's plenty out there taking submissions. Start off getting your story in. Think about how you're going to shoot your 6-page spread. You need to think about whether you're going to shoot a double-page spread. Model placement on that, because of the fold in the page is important, even in the digital world. Whether you're going to shoot a front cover, your money shot as we call it, and whether you're going to shoot a left or right hand page. So you have to plan that out in your mind as well, and then shoot your story and submit to magazines. You can even tell some magazines that you're shooting, you're going to shoot a 6-page editorial, and this is your concept. These are your models you're pulling from an agency, perhaps, a new face, and then would they be interested in publishing? And sometimes they are. And sometimes you might need what we call a pull letter from the magazine, so that the stylist can pull designers' clothing from the designers, because they know it's going to be published.
And for those getting into the business, does this expression "time for prints" with models still exist? It had quite a grubby image at some stage, didn't it?
I think the time for, I can't remember, it's changing in the digital world. Time for prints became time for CD, and time for, I still see that as more of an amateur enthusiast kind of terminology.
Right. But if you're trying to get into the industry, of course, pulling this team around you to make your original sort of formative portfolio, you need to pull people in that benefit from having those pictures, and that would be stylists and maybe designers. Well, that's harder, I would imagine. Stylist models,
is your first call.
Of course.
Yeah, it is hard. Yeah, it's hard to say, well, how can I shoot? How can I present that if I haven't shot any of that? And how can I shoot any of that if I approach a stylist and they go, we haven't shot any of that, I'm not interested in working with you? I think you probably have to, even your personal work needs to reflect a little bit of your skill set and your creativity. And personal work is very important in the fashion world. We still get picked up by some of our personal work, even over our commercial work as artists. So as long as your personal work is relative to what you shoot as well, I think you'll be okay. So don't ever stop shooting creative commercial personal work is one bit of advice I would give. Not only that, you go out and you learn more for a start.
I noticed in your portfolio, by the way, you have a Paralympian within the pictures. I spoke recently with Zebedee Management. I don't know if you're familiar with Zebedee.
I've heard the name.
A couple of weeks back, one of the co-founders who specialise, they specialise in modelling assignments for people with disability, those with alternative appearances, they say, and trans non-binary. And there is this feeling that within the world of fashion in particular, that there's been something in the industry has been very slow at best, I think, description to represent.
Yeah.
I wonder what your thoughts are. You're a photographer, and if we as photographers have more of a responsibility in the casting and proposition to those that we do cast, perhaps, is it our job to help balance this, or is it the work of casting directors?
Yeah, it is. Casting is a specific thing, because yes, the photographer can have an input into the casting. Generally, with the bigger commercial clients, the high-end clients, they will already have planned their advertising campaign and the look that they're going for. So they might have a very specific requirement saying, hey, I want oriental looking model, and she's got to be based in Paris because we're not paying any travel from UK, so she's got to be local. It can even come down to, those little sort of nitty gritty bits really for budgets and things. But they may say, hey, we're doing this shoot. We want blonde, we want brunette, we want redhead, we want pale skin, olive skinned. They generally have an idea where their campaign is going to present their look. We have an input then in a casting of all the models that fit that criteria, and then we can help select the models that we think would suit the shoot the best, if that makes any sense.
It's interesting that David P.D. Hyde, he cast Ellie Goldstein, who's 18 and has Down syndrome for a Gucci campaign, and I'm sure you're familiar with that campaign. Yeah. On Insta, I just checked it actually before we started talking, and that's heading now toward the 900,000 likes mark.
Yep.
And I know from my conversation with Zebedee that Harry Styles managed a third of that on the likes front.
Yeah.
So it does kind of show, doesn't it, that the public are able to understand that inclusion is important.
Yes, 100%.
And that moving ahead now, that would be good for everybody, and because there is this sort of reinforced image thing that I think platforms like Insta have played a part in. The sort of desire to represent the so-called perfect model with a perfect weight, with a perfect looks for the perfect campaign, and life's not like that, is it?
No, it doesn't exist. And I agree with you. I do think the fashion industry has been very slow to change, and even though they are making change, and it is at a better rate than it has been for diversity and equality and everything, I think they could step a bit more. So people, like Paralympians and people with any disabilities or anything else, I think they should be involved more and more in these things. And why not? Because, they're the same as us, We're part of the human race, and we can all promote something.
I was surprised to get the figure that 20% of people are registered disabled, which really shows you that we're not entirely representative at all.
Yeah.
How do you keep your work fresh or crisp? To use your terminology, I'm going to keep using this. I'm sorry, but how do you keep it fresh? Because there must be a constant. It must be very difficult when you've worked with certain models or certain looks to think, right, I know that works. That's great. I can do that again. I can do that until the cows come home. But you can't do that, can you? Because you've constantly got to be reinventing, haven't you, in the studio?
You have, yeah. And I think you've got to carry on pushing your own boundaries. And you can do that in many ways. Yes, change the way you shoot. I said earlier, I don't shoot a lot of, slow shutter speed and movement and things. And I will in my personal work. I've got some projects I'm setting up at the moment for shooting now that lockdown's lifting a little bit. And strangely, I moan about the fashion industry at the beginning, but I am actually refreshing my fashion book with some model agencies in London and things, and some stylists. So even my work needs a refresh. So that's what I'll be doing. I will be concentrating on next season's trends, but I won't have access to any of that clothing until at least September, because it won't be available to get access to yet. So we've got that to plan in our testing. Collaborations is what we call time fours. We call it a collaboration, not a time for edition, time for prints. So yeah, you've got to go out and push your boundaries. And if you want to work commercially, you've got to see what's trending in the next season, and when you've got access to those kind of items for that season to present to magazines. So I will be pushing the boundaries there. Other creative ways, just choose one lens for your camera and go out and push your boundaries by shooting a mixed series of shoots, but using only one lens. If you don't use a wide lens very much, throw it on your camera and go and shoot wide. You'll be surprised how many images you might like. Get down on the floor and look up, lay on your back and look up with your camera instead of standing and looking across all the time.
One of those new lenses, would it be the 50mm f1?
Oh, do you know what? I haven't got my hands on that, but it sounds so nice.
Sorry to throw that one. Now, it kind of feels like a return visit for me, because I've been on your podcast. Now you've been on ours, myself and Kev.
That's right.
How's Podlomania going?
It's going good. We've had a few interruptions with COVID-19.
Yes.
Sadly, with our schedules that go out, we're every 2 weeks for hours. We've had some interruptions because, sadly, on the family side of things, we've had some things we've had to put first and deal with during these terrible times. So we've had some hurdles to get over, but we're back and running. So one episode 30 was released a few days ago, and we're trying to get back on track to get the bi-weekly releases out again. But yeah, it's going well though. It's going good. Not as good as you guys, I don't think, but yeah.
Oh, shush.
It's your radio smooth voice.
Where are we
Neil.
now? I think we're in our 5,000th episode. I think
you did one a day at one point, didn't you?
I'll tell you what, there were times over the break, it felt like... over the break? What am I talking about? Break. Terminology. Break. Yes, break from earning, maybe.
Yes.
But there were times over that horrible COVID thing that honestly it did feel like... But it's always... It's a lot of fun doing podcasting. And I often think, in a world which is going to embrace more and more of it over the next couple of years, more photographers should be thinking about it. I think it's a great way to communicate with an audience that can be a photographer if you're into doing workshops. It can be your audience if you're doing, I don't know, something about planning a perfect wedding. I can't think that there would be many better positioned to talk about, to brides and grooms about having a wedding day, for example, than photographers, because it really, never mind what the butler saw,
Exactly.
what the photographer sees, I tell you what, is far more. I think there's some of those that actually organise weddings.
Even though you don't press the button, some things you see through your viewfinder is like, oh wow. It's like,
no, I just keep pressing the button at those moments.
Good man. Some of the unplanned shots are the best, whether, as we call them in our industry, me and Jake call it, we call them happy accidents. But,
Yes, happy accidents. Perfect. Thanks to Wayne Johns over the last couple of weeks. Next week, we take to the skies, quite literally, for an ex-photographer who's also an Airbus A380 pilot. The irony of a photographer who swaps heavy DSLRs for the lighter, more manoeuvrable X-series cameras of Fujifilm, swapping his lighter aircraft for the biggest passenger-carrying aircraft in any fleet. Anyway, Bjorn Merman next week on the show from Dubai. Right, back to your questions. This one, when I saw the title, Compromised Position, I thought, I think you've sent this to the wrong show, Mark Bodie. Do you remember Bodie? Bodie and Doyle. Was it Bodie and Doyle in The Professionals? Goes back to that Capri again, doesn't it? 2.8.
Yeah, it was a Capri, yeah.
It was a Capri.
2.8 injection.
In fact, they both had Capris, didn't they? Didn't they throw themselves across the bonnets or something?
Yeah.
That's a bit Starsky and Hutch.
Yeah.
Sort of British version of.
I think Starsky and Hutch followed them, copied them.
No, they were first.
No.
Yes, they were. A random question for you. During your centuries of wedding photography experience, have either of you made a picture that later on you find out you captured somebody in a compromising position? Oh, yes. Perhaps the best man of the bride in an inappropriate embrace, or maybe something a bit more paranormal, and you made a picture that has Uncle Bob in it, but he's been dead for decades, and you only find this out when the family tell you. Well, that'd be worrying, wouldn't it? Can you imagine actually putting one of those into... I'm sorry, I'm being a bit of a what's-it now, but can you imagine putting a picture of Great Auntie Maud by several generations removed, so it doesn't seem too inappropriate, this suggestion, but just sort of put it in Photoshop, very hazy in the background. Somebody say, my God, that's great Auntie Maud.
In Latin America, they still do that. They do the death pictures in some parts of Latin America.
I know, but I'm talking about putting in great Auntie Maud as a bit of a joke.
Yeah, and yes.
Which would be a bit inappropriate, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes. But compromising positions. So sometimes you do see people and you think you're looking at that person in a sort of way that doesn't seem quite right.
That's what I was thinking.
I did take a picture of Daddy's special friend at a wedding.
Oh no!
This is going back a few years.
Dear.
And I was left thinking, this doesn't seem... So I hung around a bit more, took a load more photos.
Is that where the story ends? That's where the trail goes dead.
Yeah. What about you?
I agree. I've often, sometimes you look at bridesmaids looking at grooms, and very infrequently, of course. And
it's usually the other way around.
And there's something in the eye that says, "I know something."
Oh, you mean they've got some info on them?
Yeah, there's a little bit. I've seen that a couple of times.
Have you?
And actually, I did once get an email off a groom who said, "Can you please take down the blog post?"
Right.
Beautiful as the pictures were, but
because of that sort of situation,
we separated a week after the wedding because I found out that the wife, the bride, had been having an affair with the best man.
Oh my word!
or before the wedding, during the wedding, and there after the wedding.
During the wedding?
Well, not perhaps during the wedding day itself, but they were together.
Right.
So of course I took the blog post down. And said, I'm very sorry, but I did revisit the images and looked, and there's definitely some stuff. Yeah, you can see it. You would never have noticed it beforehand, but you can see it.
See, the trouble is, you're mixing alcohol and a lot of people having a good time, and sometimes things go awry, don't they?
I got a cracking picture of a lady falling over, too many gin and tonics, and I've not published this picture.
Did Gemma go to that wedding then? Sorry, Gemma, I do apologize. I know, I'm sorry.
It's a fantastic picture. I love it. And I gave it to the bride. I think I've talked about this before, but I didn't make it public. And it's one of those pictures that I just so wish that you can see it. It's very, very funny, and by all accounts the lady herself was fine with it and said it was very funny too. But a couple of too many gin and tonics flat on her back. I just happened to be taking a picture at the same time.
There was a chap at a venue not long before COVID broke out, and you see this site quite a lot, but it's just the way he did it. He'd had a few too many gin and tonics during the dinner, and he'd fallen asleep on the sofa. But it was almost like he was at home. He claimed this sofa, like his leg was up on the top and the other leg was down the floor, and his hand had just collapsed with the glass, and the glass was empty because it would all poured out on the floor, and he was snoring. There were people all around him. He was obviously he was of I suppose comical value to people, and I did think, should I take a picture? Should I of him or not? But I thought, well, I'm here to tell the story of the day, and people will say, "Oh, do you remember when Bob fell asleep during and nothing would wake him up?" Honestly, they were putting things on top of him. Somebody put a chair on him at one stage.
I'd definitely be taking pictures of that.
I did, but then I got asked to take those all down as well.
Yeah.
So it's a very difficult thing to do, isn't it? Because you don't want to be seen to be taking advantage of somebody's ineptitude to watch the amount that they drink.
No.
Just before we go into another question, I've got a complaint here.
Oh dear.
Wallace Shackleton. That sounds very formal, doesn't it? Just having the name Wallace Shackleton means that this complaint holds some sort of water. Any chance you can make the podcast a bit longer? I listen while editing photos. Invariably, the podcast ends. He's not happy about it.
Well,
how long do you need it to be?
It's going to be shorter next week because we've got no good words to say about us.
I know. So you better, Wallace Shackleton, you better write in a review.
Yes.
So that we've got one to read out next week. Right, your question.
Okay, this is from Bryce Hook. And he says, really good to, again, this is a bit of a comment and a question. Really good to hear Kent Rathod on the show last week. Now, I know that I got his name totally wrong, didn't I? I called it Kent Rathod, but you've referred to him as Kent Rathod.
Yes, but I did check with him.
Yes, exactly.
And you didn't have the advantage of being able to check with him.
Whereas I didn't, correct.
Whereas I was on the phone to him, I said, can I just check? And he said, yes, Rathod. But I know a lot of people say Rathod, he said.
Yes.
So it's not a problem.
So, anyway, really good to hear Kent Rathod on the show last week talking about his style of street work. He talked about shooting raw, but not having his settings in camera on black and white view. And he presents all his work in monochrome. Did you say, Kevin, that you shoot all your work with black and white settings on, even though you know some of your work will be colour? And I wondered what the advantage of your methods are. Regards, Bryce. Yes. So, we have talked about this, but it's fine. And I do have a YouTube video discussing all of this. And essentially, I do, even if I'm shooting raw, I have my viewfinder in black and white.
Do you?
Yes, because you can see the light and shade much clearer. Yeah. So, if you combine that with spot metering, you're going to get very, very good idea of where the light is falling, the shadow, the shade, the fall off, the depth of it, etc., etc. And of course, if you're shooting raw, then it will always be in color. Just remember, though, if you're shooting JPEG, there ain't no going back from a black and white JPEG.
No,
black and white forever.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
What it is. It is what it is.
I spent ages finding that meme for you.
It is what it is. It will be what it will be.
Yeah. I couldn't find that one. Oh, there was, by the way, Mark Bodie. We've never done this before, I think. Just to go back to a question. You know, we were talking just a moment ago about the taking pictures of people in compromising positions. He had another question, which is quite kind of attached to the first one. If a fight broke out at a wedding, would you shoot it? You know, for documentation purposes, he says. Would you?
I think I would. The thing is, ultimately, we are still at a wedding, and
Yes.
whilst we both like to, say we're
Show the real world.
pure documentary photographers and all that kind of stuff, you do sometimes have to understand what the people would like to be photographed.
Absolutely.
And I mean, there are some people out there that would be all over that, and be kind of putting it on their website and stuff. I'd be taking a visual guide from what's going on around. Luckily, it's never happened, and I would hope it doesn't.
I have had it happen once. Yeah. With my assistant photographer, it was in the days I used to use second photographer. So this is going back a good few years. Did make some pictures of it, and then they clocked him doing it, and it looked like it might get quite nasty. So I always vowed after that, no. In fact, I didn't make any pictures of that moment anyway, but I always vowed after that moment, so definitely not. We're not there as evidence collectors. We're there to tell the story of a day.
I remember.
Well, I suppose it is a story of a day, but I think what Kev said makes a lot of sense.
When I was about 16, I worked in
during the war.
I worked in the Harvester in Newport, and I was.
What was that like?
Interesting. I'm not going to say too much about what happened there, but we
taxi for Mullins. Came home safely.
I was working in the kitchen in the.
Were you a KP?
What's that mean?
Kitchen porter.
No. I was a chef. I was a grill chef.
Were you?
Yeah. I was the guy.
I'm so sorry.
Flipping the burgers.
Well, there's nothing wrong with being a KP, but
No.
Are you a burger flipper?
Yeah, and steaks and all that kind of stuff. I could make a mean tuna salad.
Can you?
Yeah. Anyway, at this one point, there was this.
All a bit wasted on you now. You're a vegan.
I know. All of the the amount of times I used to just bend down behind the counter and stuff my face full of cheese.
You did not eat stuff that you shouldn't be eating.
Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway, this fight broke out in the restaurant.
Right.
And I did a Bodie and Doyle moment.
Did you break it up?
No. Well, kind of. I never quite got there in time because, you'll figure out. One of the waitresses was being shouted at by this group of lads.
Was she in a cocktail bar?
In the Harvester, yeah. This Harvester was one of those ones that was very like the H on the wall outside was hanging down a little bit.
No, right, okay, yeah. And, I know the place.
Sticky carpets.
Yeah.
And she was being shouted at by these guys. I don't know what it was about, but and I was like, da, 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 da. So I leapt over the counter.
What's that theme tune?
Harrison, Raise the Lost Heart.
Yes.
Lost Heart. Yeah. Put my little leather hat on.
Yeah.
Got my whip. Da, 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 da. And I was like, I'm going to be a hero. Be a hero. I leapt over the counter. Yeah. Just about to go and kind of run over and save her, but you had to wear catering trousers, and they're very baggy. My catering trousers got caught on the top metal, the corner of the plate, the hot plate.
Yeah.
And they just tore from the bottom to the top. Just tore, like simple as that. And I just fell over. And then
showing everything.
Basically. And that was the end of my my kind of hero moment.
Yeah.
It did stop the fight though, because they all just
fell about
looked
laughing
at me, thinking, "What the hell's going on?"
Yeah. Who's the naked chef?
Yeah.
You were well before the times, you see.
How would you like your burger, sir? Medium rare.
Mats, we'll do the book in a second. Mats Fernblad Thorsen. After moving more and more away from RAW, I've started to appreciate the apps function to transfer images to photos, iOS, on the fly. However, I edit and store all my images in Lightroom and export some of them to photos to have the memories there, e.g. about 15 out of 200 from each of the trips that I make. This makes importing everything to photos just another step in the workflow. Do you know any way to wirelessly transfer photos from the camera to Lightroom? He's using an XT30. My next camera upgrade will probably be when 5G and auto-upload is possible, which Kev talks about a lot, and I know you're looking forward to that day, auto-uploading in 5G.
Doesn't the new Canon thing do that? And everybody uploads their photos from their Canon camera to the Canon website, and then the Canon website deleted them all.
Did it?
Yeah.
Correct us on that if we're wrong, please.
Yes, do correct us if you're wrong.
Yeah.
But
we can put that right next week, but
I'm sure it's true. I'm sure they both had teething problems, let's just say.
But is there a way of wirelessly transferring photos from the camera to actual Lightroom? So you don't have to, go through the process of ingestion. Ingestion?
Well, it depends on how it's
indigestion.
If it's in situ, if you've got Lightroom running on a computer in front of you, you can do it by setting what's known as a watch folder in Lightroom.
Right.
So you get Lightroom to watch a folder. You get your app, your Wi-Fi app on your phone or whatever, or the tethered cable or whatever you're using, to send the pictures to that folder, and then Lightroom will see it. From outside, if you're outside just shooting on the foot, I'm not sure. I don't think so. I mean, you can probably, if you're using Adobe Cloud, there may well be plugins or something to do it. But yeah, I don't know of any. Not that I'm aware of off the cuff.
No,
I'm sure there will be technical ways of doing it, but not simple ways.
And before we do, sorry about that, we didn't really give you a good answer on it. Well, we did, but it's just not possible. Terrell Woods, just very quickly before we do the book. Hi guys, just thought this might be of interest. If we can ever freely travel again, he says in brackets. When is this going to be, Kev? When can we go back to travelling?
Stop using the words if, use the words when.
When can we go
Positive
back?
mental attitude.
Right,
this
positive,
is Podcast Kev.
Podcast Kev. When are we going back to travelling, Kev? I want an answer from Positive Kev.
Well, I'm travelling today. I'm travelling to Worcestershire.
Oh, yes.
There we go.
Yeah, but not by aircraft.
No, by car.
If ever in New York, I think you'll find this a worthwhile diversion. The Bronx Documentary Centre, the BDC.
I've been there.
Have you?
Yes.
So the Tim Hetherington Photo Book Library is reopening by appointment only Mondays through Fridays. You can reserve a date and time block. Oh, you lucky things. If you're in that part of the world,
yes,
then the library is one of New York's only libraries dedicated to photography. So you've been there, have you?
I have been there.
What's it like?
Incredible. They also have a really, really cool Instagram feed.
Do they?
Bronx Documentary Photography.
BDC.
BDC, yeah. We will link to it, of course. I always keep forgetting to mention the website. The website.
Yeah.
Where we will link to things like this, the Instagram account for the BDC, and also a Patreon page.
Yes. So that podcast.
How is that Ferrari?
So that podcast. We have this joke in the family. So podcast Kev, by the way, I'll finish that sentence. Can remain in married bliss. We have this joke, by the way, with my mother-in-law, who I know some people will be aghast in horror that I should do this, but mother-in-law is my bookkeeper. Mm-hmm. I know I did have to think long and hard about this, but it seems to work.
Yeah. Why wouldn't it work? Why shouldn't it work?
Well, I know some people say, you shouldn't necessarily with your finances.
I see.
Necessarily be sharing everything with your mother-in-law.
I see.
But it kind of works. But we have this thing that I've always, because she's always said, well, how much do I get paid? And I was, I like you to think of it a bit like the Ewings. And that, we're all kind of helping each other out and living in the same, well, not literally living in the same house. But we're all helping each other out.
Well, they never really helped each other out in Dallas, did they? They
did really.
Kept shooting each other and having affairs with each other.
That's not the best example, is it? No. But so we have this thing that they really want to go to. I think it's New York, to go shopping, Christmas shopping or something. And I've always said, well, that's fine. I'll buy you the airfare tickets one day, as for all this bookkeeping work that you do. And she'll ask me every so often, say, well, how are we doing with the airfare? And I'll say, well, it's not been a great month, though. You're just about edging out. You've left the Bristol Channel and you're going across Ireland at this. They've been at the Irish point now in their flight for about 2 years.
Cheapest chips now, flights to New York at the minute.
They would
imagine.
Don't tell my mother-in-law that. She'll be cashing in the chips. Right, let's go for the book of the week.
So Anton Corbijn, again, very famous photographer. Many of you will have heard of him. Beautiful documentaries on Netflix, I think, about Anton Corbijn. This one is called Private Passion. It's a German printed book by Körber publishers, or the Körber book, Körber publishing book. A5 in size, portrait. Now, my German is not great.
Really? I thought you spoke fluent German.
Ich möchte eine Bier bitte.
Yeah. What chapter's that in?
That's in chapter Kev. And it's all in German. All the text. There is some text in it at the back mostly, and presumably just describing like the reason behind the book. My understanding is that it's more pictures that were kind of not ones that were necessarily published originally, and there's a lot of conceptual stuff in here. There's some self-portraits in there, some beautiful pictures on page 6 and 7, these lovely black and white.
See, again, it's the depth. I'm always struck by depth in black and whites. I've never been. I know
all film, of course.
Yeah, salad of grey stuff is. Oh my word! See, we're back with having. Look, if you got a picture of Bowie.
I never understand. I've seen a lot of pictures of David Bowie in what can only be seen as described as a nappy.
That's not a nappy. That's a what do you call it? No,
beautiful picture, but anyway, it's
no, it's one of those loincloths, isn't it?
Who's that?
I want to say that German electronic
it is
musician.
Him, isn't it?
Yeah. I can't think of his name.
Is it from Kraftwerk?
Kraftwerk.
And on page 50, we've got smoking Keith Richards. He always seems to have a cigarette, doesn't he?
You can't get a bad picture of Keith Richards, though, can you?
He's got one of those faces.
Yeah, it has kind of that lived-in look that just photographically must be a joy to make.
Gemma often says this about some men. She says they get better looking as they get older.
They're mature.
Yeah, and I think that's true.
I've heard this. I think actually that's Gemma being charitable.
She said, "This is the way she pacifies me every year."
Kev, you're maturing nicely. Yeah, you're like a fine cheese.
That's what's his name, the comedian?
Oh, Danny DeVito.
Danny DeVito. Yeah, Danny DeVito.
See, another one. See, when you're photographing these really interesting looking people.
But interestingly, that Danny DeVito picture, and of course you have to see the book, people, because it's you can't see the pictures. It's the only picture in the book that is sepia toned, coolish, but that matches his character, doesn't it? Matches his personality. There's Stephen Hawking's there. Look,
blimey, these are very that I've never seen a picture of Stephen Hawking's taken quite like that.
And it's got
he's using the mirrored reflection in his
speech machine,
in his glasses and the speech machine there.
Yeah, beautiful stuff. So this is a very simple book of probably outtakes, I would imagine, if you're German. We do have some German listeners, I know that. Perhaps you could read the back of it, and
we'll send you the book and you can transcribe it for us. Is it available?
It's available. Anton Corbijn, Private Passion, Kerber, the publishers, and I just looked it up on Abe Books, and it is available for £60.
Right,
but you can probably still get this.
What is it about Anton that you particularly like? You've got various books of his.
I love. That's a nice picture as well. That's the spine of the book.
That's the spine just broken. Oh dear. What is it?
Well, there's he did the film Control, which is about Joy Division.
Oh right.
And Ian Curtis and the death of Ian Curtis. Brilliant film, absolutely brilliant film. 2007, all black and white.
The entire film was?
Entire film's black and white. And he also did...
the coolest British movie of 2007.
It is a really good film, Yeah. And
the only colour you get is on the film poster.
Yeah, in fact, it's great. And, it's all about the forming of Joy Division. And I like Joy Division and kind of Ian Curtis and all that kind of early stuff. But he was a very passionate. There's also a documentary about Anton Corbijn, which was on Amazon Prime, maybe on Netflix. You'll find it if you just type his name in, and it's really interesting because there's a lot of self-conversations, and it turns out that his father was a Presbyterian minister,
right?
In when he was younger, a very, very strict, very puritanical person. So he spent a lot of time by himself, Anton.
Has he?
And I think that manifests itself in his personality, and he's made some amazing photos, but also films. He was the director of The American with George Clooney. He was the director of that film, which is good and
reasonably good name to work with.
It's a goodish film. A lot of violence in that. I just didn't like it. But
these very dark films.
Yeah,
they're all very dark films.
And obviously he's predominantly a photographer, but with work he's done most of the U2 covers.
Yeah.
And I think he worked with Depeche Mode, like loads. He's done portraits of the Queen and things like that. His photography is amazing. His personality, I think, is quite polarizing for some people.
Why's that?
I think some people find him a little bit
stark, or
that's probably the right word.
Yeah. Dutch photographer,
but we don't. It's not somebody you're likely to bump into in the street. I just love his stuff. Absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Anyway, this book is Private Passion. I've got lots of his books.
Isn't this funny? Picture yourself going on a journey. Corbijn began his journey as a music photographer when he saw the Dutch musician Herman Brood playing at a cafe around 1975. The reason why, by the way, Herman Brood just suddenly sort of struck me. I was looking at this on Wikipedia here. Was the other day we were sat in. I'm taking you back to the journey when we went for the day out with the kids to Swanage, and we were sat in the rain in a fish and chip restaurant, and there were loads of gulls, and we were having the conversation that we always have, that you have. Can't call a gull a seagull, and in our family we now call them Hermans, and it stretches right back to when I was a kid. We were very friendly with a Dutch family. And they called and it comes from them. They used to call their gulls for some reason after Herman Brood. And so the Dutch, I don't know if it's all Dutch, but certainly a fraction of people in Holland seem to know gulls by the name of Herman because of Herman Brood. And there's his name popping up. That's weird.
Wikipedia Wheel of Fortune, isn't it? You could probably click on that and find out he's wrote a book about gulls or something.
Gulls or something like that, yeah.
But interestingly, the David Bowie picture I mentioned in the loincloth, it just does explain this on Wikipedia too. It's a photograph of David Bowie behind the scenes of The Elephant Man. So it all makes sense.
Oh,
it's not a nappy.
No, it's not a nappy. Well, I did say it was a loincloth.
Yeah, you did.
The Great Bowie. And that's it for this week. Thank you very much, as always, for being a part of it. There's several things we now need you to do for next week. Yes, Patreon. Shall I be typically
English? Don't be dismissive of it.
Embarrassed. No, I shouldn't be. But yeah, it does help us. It helps us keep the show, I like to say, growing, but most importantly, going. And it helps me build the swimming pool. Not at all. But we do need your questions. So you've been fantastic over the summer, but keep them coming in as we enter into autumn and winter.
I love winter. It's my favourite time of the year.
Is it?
Proper cold winter I like. Not rainy, miserable. I like cold.
I just get all a bit cold and my fingers go white and I just can we have summer back again, please? But Podcast Kev likes winter.
Yep.
So we need your questions in now. Start sending them back in, please, to the email address, which is click@fujicast.co.uk.
Or send them in via the website.
You can.
The still shiny new website.
Yes. Through the contact page, or indeed using the Facebook group. That was that. There was another thing we had to remember to do as well. Was that it? That was just the questions, the Patreon. Oh yes, the reviews. Otherwise, we've got a tumbleweed feature for next week.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to bring a sandwich.
So we can
have a bit of a break. Yeah.
If you can share the show, please do so on Twitter or Facebook. Music from Blue Wednesday, supporting music from the incredible artlist.io. Head over to FujiCast.co.uk for all the links on today's show and links to us as well if you want to find out a bit more about what we do. And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
The FujiCast is an independent Loading Zone production. Email the show with your questions and words of wisdom to click@fujicast.co.uk. Email any complaints and political nonsense to our wives, who will deal with your comments in their own good time and in their own good way.